The dust of the main street kicked up around Nora Blackburn's boots as she strode toward the general store, ignoring the whispers that followed her like persistent flies on a summer day. Camp Verde, Arizona Territory, 1884, was not a place known for its hospitality to women with reputations like hers, but she had no choice but to be here now. "That's her," a woman's voice hissed as Nora passed. "The dancer from Tucson with the scandalous past." Nora kept her chin high, her auburn hair tucked neatly beneath a modest bonnet that did little to disguise the beauty that had once been her livelihood. At 26, she had seen enough of the world to know that small towns harbored the biggest tongues, and Camp Verde was proving no exception. Inside the general store, the conversations dimmed to a murmur. Mr. Potts, the proprietor, gave her a curt nod as she approached the counter. "Miss Blackburn, what can I help you with today?" "I need supplies for the week, Mr. Potts. Flour, coffee, sugar, and some fabric if you have it." Her voice was soft but clear, revealing the remnants of an Eastern education that further marked her as different. As Mr. Potts gathered her items, the bell above the door jangled. A tall figure ducked through the doorway, bringing with him the scent of horses and open country. Nora didn't need to turn to know who had entered. The sudden silence told her everything. Daniel Grayson was Camp Verde's most eligible bachelor, a rancher whose property stretched across the Verde valleys, a man whose family had helped settle this territory when it was still wild and untamed. His reputation was as solid as the mountains that surrounded the town. "Afternoon, Mr. Potts," Daniel called, his deep voice filling the space. "Need some nails and that order of feed I mentioned last week." Nora kept her eyes on the counter, hoping to complete her transaction without interaction. It wasn't that she disliked Daniel Grayson, quite the opposite. It was the awareness that a man like him should keep his distance from a woman with her past. "Be right with you, Mr. Grayson," Mr. Potts replied, finishing with Nora's order. "That'll be $1.65, Miss Blackburn." As Nora reached into her reticule for the money, she felt rather than saw Daniel move closer, taking position beside her at the counter. "Miss Blackburn," he said, tipping his hat. "Fine day, isn't it?" She glanced up, meeting eyes as blue as the Arizona sky set in a face weathered by sun and wind. "Yes, Mr. Grayson, quite fine." "I hear you're teaching piano to the children now." Nora nodded, surprised he knew. "Mrs. Wallace was kind enough to recommend me to several families. My sister Sarah mentioned you're quite talented, says you play like you learned in New York itself." "Boston, actually," Nora said, immediately regretting offering even that small piece of her past. Daniel smiled, revealing straight white teeth beneath his neatly trimmed mustache. "Boston, New York, all the same to a simple rancher like me." There was nothing simple about Daniel Grayson, from his commanding presence to the intelligence that shone in his eyes. At 32, he had built his ranch into one of the territory's most prosperous, all while maintaining a reputation for fairness with both his workers and the local Apache tribes. Mr. Potts returned with Daniel's order, breaking the moment between them. Nora gathered her purchases, nodded politely, and turned to leave. "Miss Blackburn," Daniel called after her, "if you'd allow me, I'd like to walk you home. Those packages look heavy." The store fell silent again, all eyes watching, waiting for her response. "That's very kind, Mr. Grayson, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition at all," he insisted, already moving to take her packages. "I'd consider it an honor." Outside in the street, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows as they walked side by side. Nora could feel the stares from storefronts and boardwalks, could almost hear the mental scratching of pencils as the town gossips composed tomorrow's stories. "You shouldn't be seen with me," she said quietly. "It won't do your reputation any good." Daniel's stride didn't falter. "My reputation can withstand a neighborly gesture, Miss Blackburn." "You don't understand," Nora insisted. "People talk. People always talk. Especially in towns like Camp Verde, it's what passes for entertainment when you're far from city lights." They turned down the side street toward the small house Nora rented at the edge of town. It was modest but clean, with a small garden she had started to bring some beauty to the dusty yard. "Did you plant those sunflowers?" Daniel asked, nodding toward the yellow blooms that stood tall against her fence. "Yes, they remind me of happier times." Daniel studied her face for a moment. "Miss Blackburn, would you consider giving piano lessons to my niece, my brother's girl, Emily? She's 10 and has a natural ear, according to her mother." Nora hesitated. "Mr. Grayson, I appreciate the offer, but I must be honest. There are rumors about me in town, and while some families have overlooked them, I wouldn't want to cause any difficulty between you and your family." "What kind of difficulties might those be?" he asked, his expression unreadable. Nora took a deep breath. "They say I'm not suitable company for children, that my past as an entertainer in Tucson makes me an improper influence." "An entertainer?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I was a dancer at the Silver Palace." She met his eyes defiantly. "Not the kind that simply serves drinks, Mr. Grayson, the kind that performs, the kind that men pay to watch." She expected him to make his excuses and leave, as others had when confronted with the truth. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "And now you teach piano to support yourself, because it's a skill you have that's respectable?" "Yes." "Then you're precisely the kind of person I want teaching my niece, someone who understands the value of reinvention and hard work." Nora blinked in surprise. "Most people don't see it that way." "I'm not most people, Miss Blackburn." He set her packages down on her porch step. "Think about my offer. Emily has talent and you have skill. Seems a shame to let wagging tongues keep those two things apart." With that, he tipped his hat again and turned to go. Nora watched him walk away, his broad shoulders straight, his stride confident. Something stirred within her, a feeling she had long ago decided was not for women like her hope. The next morning, Nora was at Mrs. Wallace's home, finishing a lesson with her youngest daughter when there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Wallace, a kindly widow who had been Nora's first supporter in Camp Verde, answered it. "Mr. Grayson, what a pleasant surprise." Nora's fingers faltered on the keys. She hadn't expected Daniel to appear so soon or so publicly. "Mrs. Wallace," Daniel's voice carried from the entryway. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I came to speak with Miss Blackburn about piano lessons for my niece." Mrs. Wallace appeared in the parlor doorway, Daniel towering behind her. "Of course, not at all. Molly's lesson is just finishing. Please come in." Molly, a bright 8-year-old, gathered her music sheets. "Did I do well today, Miss Blackburn? You were wonderful, Molly. Remember to practice your scales every day, just as we discussed." Once Molly had scampered off, Daniel entered the parlor fully. He wore a clean shirt and vest today, though his boots still bore the dust of ranch work. "Miss Blackburn," he said, hat in hand, "I hope you've considered my proposal." Mrs. Wallace's eyebrows rose and Nora felt her cheeks warm. "About the piano lessons," Daniel clarified, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he noticed Mrs. Wallace's reaction. "I have, Mr. Grayson," Nora replied. "I would be happy to teach your niece if her parents approve. My brother and his wife have already agreed. They trust my judgment." He approached the piano. "Perhaps I could hear you play something, to tell Emily what to expect." Nora hesitated, then placed her hands on the keys. She chose a piece by Chopin, one that spoke of distant dreams and quiet yearnings. Her fingers moved with practiced grace, and the music filled the small parlor with emotion that words could never convey. When the last note faded, she looked up to find Daniel watching her intensely. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "My father was a music professor in Boston," she answered. "Before he died and left us with nothing but debts." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "And that's how you ended up in Tucson." "Life takes unexpected turns, Mr. Grayson." Mrs. Wallace, who had been listening from the doorway, cleared her throat. "Nora, dear, I'm expecting Reverend Parker for tea. Perhaps you and Mr. Grayson might continue your discussion elsewhere." The mention of the Reverend was a gentle reminder that appearances mattered in Camp Verde. Nora nodded, gathering her things. Outside, the midday sun beat down mercilessly. Daniel offered his arm, which Nora hesitantly took. "I thought perhaps we might discuss Emily's lessons over lunch," he suggested. "The hotel dining room serves a decent meal." Nora pulled back slightly. "Mr. Grayson, I appreciate your kindness, but having lunch with you in public would only fuel the gossip." "Let them talk," he said simply. "I'm hungry, you need to eat, and we have business to discuss." His confidence was both alarming and appealing. Nora found herself nodding despite her better judgment. The territorial hotel dining room fell silent when they entered together. Mrs. Prescott, the banker's wife, nearly choked on her tea. Mr. Jenkins, the newspaper editor, adjusted his spectacles as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Daniel led Nora to a table by the window, pulling out her chair with a flourish that would have been at home in the finest Boston restaurant. He ordered for both of them beefsteak, potatoes, and coffee. "Everyone is staring," Nora murmured, keeping her eyes on the tablecloth. "Let them," Daniel replied. "Now about Emily. She's available for lessons on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Would that suit your schedule?" They discussed the details of the arrangement, Daniel insisting on paying more than Nora's usual rate for the inconvenience of having her come to the ranch. By the time their food arrived, Nora had almost forgotten their audience until Sheriff Tom Miller approached their table. "Afternoon, Daniel," the sheriff said, pointedly ignoring Nora. "Might I have a word?" Daniel wiped his mouth with his napkin. "Of course, Tom, you know Miss Blackburn," the sheriff gave a curt nod. "We've met. Daniel outside, if you don't mind." Daniel frowned but stood, excusing himself. Through the window, Nora could see the two men in intense conversation, the sheriff gesturing animatedly while Daniel stood with arms crossed. When Daniel returned, his jaw was set in a hard line. "Is everything all right?" Nora asked. "Fine," he said curtly. "The sheriff was just sharing some concerns about our friendship." "What did he say?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. "He said that you'd bring me shame, that associating with a former dancer from a Tucson saloon would damage my standing in the community and hurt my business prospects." Nora's heart sank. "He's right, I should go." She began to rise, but Daniel's hand shot out, gently grasping her wrist. "Do you know what I told him?" Daniel's eyes held hers. "I said if caring about a hard-working, talented woman who's trying to build a respectable life brings me shame, then I'll wear it proudly." Nora sat back down, stunned. "You said that to the sheriff?" "I did." Daniel released her wrist. "And I meant it. Now, shall we finish our lunch?" "I believe you were about to tell me which music books Emily should purchase." For the first time since arriving in Camp Verde, Nora felt a genuine smile spread across her face. "Yes, Mr. Grayson, I believe I was." That lunch marked the beginning of what the town would soon call Daniel Grayson's peculiar fascination with the former dancer. Twice a week, Nora rode out to the Grayson ranch to give Emily piano lessons. The girl was indeed talented, with quick fingers and a good ear. She also possessed her uncle's directness. "Uncle Daniel talks about you all the time," Emily announced during their third lesson. "He says you're the most interesting person in Camp Verde." Nora focused on the sheet music. "That's very kind of him. Now let's try that passage again." "Are you going to marry him?" Emily asked, ignoring the redirection. "Emily, that's not an appropriate question." "Why not?" "Grandmother Grayson says it's unseemly how much attention he pays you. Father says Daniel's a grown man who can make his own decisions. And Mother says you have sad eyes but a kind heart." Nora was saved from responding by Daniel's appearance at the parlor door. "How's the lesson going?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Emily grinned. "I was just asking Miss Blackburn if she's going to marry you." Daniel's eyebrows shot up, but to Nora's surprise, he didn't look embarrassed or angry. "That's a mighty personal question, Em. Did Miss Blackburn tell you it's not polite to pry?" "She did," Emily admitted. "But I was curious." "Curiosity is good," Daniel said, "but so is respect." "Now practice that piece your teacher assigned while I walk Miss Blackburn to her wagon. It's getting late." Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in streaks of pink and gold. The Grayson ranch spread out before them, cattle dotting the distant fields, cowboys moving among them like small, dark figures against the landscape. "I apologize for Emily," Daniel said as they walked toward the waiting wagon. "Children have no filter between their thoughts and their mouths." "It's all right," Nora replied. "She's a delightful girl, very talented. Thanks to your teaching." Daniel helped her onto the wagon seat. "I was wondering if you might stay for dinner tonight. My housekeeper, Mrs. Holt, has prepared more food than I could eat in 3 days." Nora hesitated. The invitation was tempting, but she was acutely aware of the dangers of becoming too comfortable in Daniel's world. "I should get back to town before dark. I could ride in with you afterward. Ensure you get home safely." That would only give people more to talk about. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Nora, may I call you Nora?" she nodded, surprising herself. "Nora, at some point we have to stop living our lives according to what others might say. I enjoy your company. I'd like to have dinner with you. It's that simple." But it wasn't simple. Nothing about their situation was simple. Still, Nora found herself saying, "All right, dinner would be nice." Mrs. Holt, a robust woman in her 60s who had been with the Grayson family for decades, gave Nora a thorough inspection when she entered the kitchen. Whatever she saw apparently met with approval because her stern expression softened. "About time Mr. Daniel invited you properly," she said. "He's been mooning about since you started teaching Emily." "Mrs. Holt," Daniel admonished, though there was no heat in his voice. "I've changed your diapers, boy, don't you Mrs. Holt me?" She turned to Nora. "Sit, child, you're too thin. Ranch cooking will put some meat on those bones." The dinner was indeed substantial: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. They ate in the dining room, with its polished oak table and views of the mountains. Nora couldn't remember the last time she dined so well or laughed so much. Daniel told stories of cattle drives and the characters he'd met throughout the territory, careful to ask about her life without pressing for details she wasn't ready to share. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the chirping of crickets. "Thank you," Nora said finally. "For dinner, for Emily's lessons, for everything." Daniel turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. "You don't need to thank me." "If anything, I should thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me there's more to life than cattle and land deals. For showing Emily that a woman can be both refined and resilient." He paused. "For making me look forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays like a schoolboy." Nora felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the mild evening. "Daniel, I know you're concerned about your reputation affecting mine," he continued, "but the truth is I don't much care what the town thinks. I care what you think, what you feel." "What I feel is complicated," she admitted. "I came to Camp Verde to start over, to leave my past behind. I never expected you." Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "I'd like to court you properly, Nora Blackburn." "With your permission." The words hung in the night air between them. Nora looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. In his eyes she saw no judgment, only genuine affection and hope. "People will talk," she whispered. "People already talk. Let's give them something worth talking about." A week later, Daniel escorted Nora to the Camp Verde Founders' Day celebration, an annual event that brought together everyone from miles around. They arrived together in his buggy, Daniel in a black suit and white shirt that made him look more handsome than any man had a right to, Nora in a blue dress that Mrs. Wallace had helped her alter for the occasion. Their entrance caused a stir. Mrs. Prescott nearly dropped her punch cup. Sheriff Miller scowled from across the town square. But others, Mrs. Wallace, the blacksmith and his wife, even old Mr. Potts nodded in greeting. "See," Daniel murmured, "not everyone is scandalized." "Not everyone," Nora agreed, though she couldn't help noticing the whispers that followed them. The celebration featured food, music, and dancing under strings of lanterns that transformed the dusty town square into something almost magical. Daniel introduced Nora to everyone as Miss Blackburn, the finest piano teacher in the Arizona territory, his hand a constant, reassuring presence at the small of her back. When the band struck up a waltz, Daniel led her to the dance floor. "I should warn you," he said with a grin, "I'm better with horses than dancing." But his movements were sure and confident as he guided her through the steps. Nora, who had once danced for money in much less respectable ways, found herself transported by the simple pleasure of being held properly, publicly, by a man who didn't hide his admiration for her. As they danced, Nora became aware of Daniel's brother watching them. Nathan Grayson was older than Daniel by 5 years, with the same blue eyes but a more weathered face and a permanent furrow between his brows. "Your brother doesn't approve," Nora observed quietly. Daniel glanced over. "Nathan worries about the family name. He'll come around. And if he doesn't, then he doesn't. I'm a grown man with my own ranch and my own mind." When the dance ended, Nathan approached them, his wife Sarah beside him. Emily trailed behind, her face lighting up when she saw Nora. "Miss Blackburn, you look beautiful. Doesn't she look beautiful, father?" Nathan managed a tight smile. "Emily, mind your manners. Miss Blackburn, my wife and I were hoping to have a word with Daniel. Family matters." "Of course," Nora said, stepping back. "I should check on Mrs. Wallace anyway." "No," Daniel said firmly. "Whatever you need to say, Nathan, you can say in front of Nora." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Very well. Mother has heard about your association with Miss Blackburn. She's concerned, as am I, about what this means for our standing in the community." "Mother is in Phoenix visiting Aunt Margaret," Daniel pointed out, "which means someone here felt the need to write to her about my personal affairs." Sarah at least had the grace to look embarrassed. "It wasn't us, Daniel, but you know how quickly word travels." "Miss Blackburn," Nathan said, turning to Nora directly, "I'm sure you're a fine piano teacher. Emily speaks highly of you, but surely you must understand that the Grayson name carries weight in this territory. My brother's choices reflect on all of us." Nora straightened her spine, channeling the poise that had once let her face rooms full of rowdy miners. "I understand completely, Mr. Grayson. Which is why I've told Daniel repeatedly that he should be careful of his association with me." "Then you understand why, but," Nora continued, "your brother is remarkably stubborn. He seems to believe that a person should be judged by their character rather than their past." Emily tugged at her father's sleeve. "Miss Blackburn is teaching me Beethoven, father. She says I have real talent." Nathan looked from his daughter to Nora, then to Daniel. Something in his expression shifted slightly. "Beethoven, is it? That's impressive." "Very," Sarah agreed, giving Nora a considering look. "Emily practices constantly now. We can hardly get her away from the piano." Nathan seemed about to say more when Sheriff Miller approached, his expression grim. "Evening, Graysons. Miss Blackburn." He tipped his hat. "Daniel, could I have a moment?" Daniel nodded to his brother and guided Nora a few steps away with the sheriff. "What is it, Tom?" "Just received a telegraph. Thought you should know with your guest here." He glanced at Nora. "James Chandler was released from Yuma prison 3 days ago." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. James Chandler, the reason she'd left Tucson, the man who had promised to kill her if she ever testified against him. The man now free because she hadn't had the courage to stand up in court. "How?" her voice faltered. "How did you know about that?" Sheriff Miller had the decency to look uncomfortable. "When you moved here, I made inquiries. Standard procedure for newcomers with unusual backgrounds." Daniel's hand found Nora's, squeezing gently. "Is there any indication Chandler knows where Miss Blackburn is?" "No, but I thought she should be warned. He made threats, according to the Tucson authorities." "Thank you, Sheriff," Daniel said. "I appreciate you telling us." When the sheriff moved away, Daniel turned to Nora, concern etched on his face. "Who is James Chandler?" Nora looked around at the celebration, suddenly feeling exposed. "Not here, please." They walked to a quiet corner of the square, away from the lanterns and music. Nora took a deep breath, steadying herself. "James Chandler owned the Silver Palace in Tucson where I danced. He was not a good man." He hurt the girls who worked for him, took most of their earnings, kept them dependent on him. Did he hurt you? Daniel's voice was low, dangerous. No, I was. Valuable to him, I brought in customers. She couldn't meet his eyes. But I saw what he did to others. When one of the younger girls died, he said it was an accident, but I knew better. I went to the authorities. You testified against him? Nora shook her head, shame washing over her. I was going to. But the night before the trial, he sent men to the boarding house where I was staying. They said if I appeared in court, I wouldn't live to see the verdict. I ran, came here. Daniel was silent for a long moment. When Nora finally looked up at him, she expected to see disgust or disappointment. Instead, his eyes were filled with a fierce protectiveness that took her breath away. You're not alone anymore, Nora. If Chandler comes looking for you, he'll have to go through me first. Daniel, you don't understand. He's dangerous. So am I when it comes to protecting people I care about. The Founders' Day celebration continued around them, but Nora barely noticed. The thought of James Chandler anywhere near Camp Verde, anywhere near Daniel, made her physically ill. I should leave, she said suddenly. Tonight, if I'm gone, he'll have no reason to come here. Daniel's hands came to rest on her shoulders, steady and sure. Running didn't solve the problem before. It won't solve it now. But Nora, listen to me. We'll talk to the sheriff, make sure he's watching for any strangers in town. I have men on my ranch who are loyal and capable. You'll be safe. It's not me I'm worried about, she admitted. It's you. Everyone connected to me. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. Daniel's expression softened. He cupped her face gently, his thumb stroking her cheek. Nothing is going to happen to me or to you. Do you trust me, did she? Nora had spent so long trusting no one but herself. Yet in the weeks since she'd met Daniel Grayson, something had changed. He had shown her nothing but respect and kindness, had defended her publicly and privately, had looked at her past and seen only her courage in trying to start anew. Yes, she whispered, I trust you. Then stay, please. His voice dropped lower. I'm not ready to say goodbye to you, Nora Blackburn, not by a long shot. The weeks that followed were marked by a strange blend of joy and tension. Daniel courted Nora, openly picking her up for Sunday drives, attending church with her, much to Reverend Parker's visible discomfort, bringing her wildflowers from the hills around his ranch. With each passing day, Nora felt herself falling more deeply for the stubborn rancher who refused to be driven away by gossip or her past. In Daniel's presence, she remembered the woman she had been before life's hardships had forced her to make difficult choices, educated, hopeful, capable of dreaming. Sheriff Miller kept his word about watching for strangers, but as August turned to September with no sign of James Chandler, the vigilance began to relax. Perhaps he had no interest in finding her. Perhaps he had moved on to other ventures, other victims. One Tuesday afternoon, Nora was at the Grayson ranch for Emily's lesson when Mrs. Holt burst into the parlor, her face ashen. Mr. Daniel, come quick, there's a fire at the north pasture. Daniel was on his feet instantly. Stay here, he told Nora and Emily. Mrs. Holt, bolt the doors after me. Through the window, Nora watched as Daniel and several ranch hands rode hard toward a plume of smoke rising in the distance. Emily pressed against her side. It's all right, Nora assured her, though her own heart was racing. Your uncle knows what he's doing. It hasn't rained in weeks, Emily said worriedly. Father says the whole territory is like tinder. They waited, the piano lesson forgotten, as minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Mrs. Holt brought them tea they didn't drink and sandwiches they didn't eat. As dusk approached, Nora's worry grew into something close to panic. Finally, they heard hoofbeats in the yard. Mrs. Holt rushed to the window. It's Mr. Daniel, she confirmed, relief evident in her voice. And the men, they looked tired but all right. When Daniel entered the house, his face was streaked with soot, his clothes smelling of smoke. Emily ran to him and he gathered her in a one-armed hug, his other hand hanging awkwardly at his side. You're hurt, Nora said, noticing the way he favored his right arm. It's nothing. Burns from some falling embers. He tried to wave off her concern but winced at the movement. "We got the fire contained before it could spread to the main grazing lands." "How did it start?" Mrs. Holt asked, already gathering bandages and salve. Daniel's expression darkened. "It wasn't an accident. Someone set it deliberately. Several small fires all started about the same time." Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Chandler," she whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "That would be my guess." One of the hands saw a stranger riding away just as they spotted the smoke. While Mrs. Holt tended to Daniel's burns, Nora paced the kitchen, guilt and fear battling within her. "I should go. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen." "Nora, no, Daniel, this is only the beginning. He won't stop. He'll burn everything you've built, hurt everyone you care about." "I'm not letting you face him alone," Daniel said firmly. "Emily, go help Mrs. Holt prepare the guest room. Miss Blackburn will be staying here tonight." "Daniel, I can't, you can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "At least for tonight. We'll ride into town in the morning, talk to the sheriff." Later, after Emily had gone to bed and Mrs. Holt had retired to her quarters, Daniel and Nora sat in the study, a lamp burning low between them. "Why does he hate you so much?" Daniel asked quietly. "You said you didn't testify." Nora stared into the lamp's flame. "No, but I was going to, and I helped other girls escape from him before I left. Girls who might have testified if they hadn't been so afraid." She paused. "There's something else, something I haven't told you." Daniel waited, patient as always. "Before I left Tucson, I took something from him, money, quite a lot of it, money he had taken from the girls who worked for him." She met Daniel's eyes defiantly. "I didn't keep it for myself. I gave most of it to the girls who wanted to leave to help them start new lives elsewhere. But Chandler doesn't know that. He thinks I stole from him for my own gain." To her surprise, Daniel laughed softly. "You continually amaze me, Nora Blackburn. You're not. Disappointed. That you had the courage to help others escape a monster, even at risk to yourself." He shook his head. "No, I'm not disappointed. I'm in awe of you." The next morning, they rode into Camp Verde together, Daniel insisting on taking the wagon rather than having Nora ride alone. They found Sheriff Miller at his office, going through wanted posters. "Heard about the fire," the sheriff said by way of greeting. "Any proof it was Chandler?" "One of my men saw a stranger," Daniel replied. "Description matches what we know of Chandler: tall, thin, scar along his jaw." Sheriff Miller nodded. "I'll send telegraphs to neighboring towns, have them keep an eye out." He looked at Nora. "Miss Blackburn, I think it might be best if you stayed somewhere safe until we locate him. Chandler has a reputation for violence." "She'll stay at my ranch," Daniel said. "I have men posted around the property now." The sheriff raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "Very well. I'll ride out later today, see if I can pick up any tracks from yesterday." As they left the sheriff's office, Nora spotted Mrs. Prescott and several other town ladies watching from across the street, their expressions a mixture of concern and disapproval. "They think I'm moving in with you," she murmured to Daniel. "Let them think what they want. Your safety is more important than propriety right now." "Daniel," she stopped, not sure how to express the tumult of emotions within her. Fear for him, guilt about bringing danger to his door, and beneath it all, a deepening affection that frightened her almost as much as James Chandler did. Daniel seemed to understand without words. He took her hand, there on the main street of Camp Verde for all to see. "We're going to get through this, Nora. Together." For the next week, Nora stayed at the Grayson ranch, sleeping in the guest room while Daniel took turns with his men keeping watch. Emily was delighted to have her piano teacher in residence, and even Nathan and his wife visited, bringing extra supplies and offering their support. "I misjudged you," Nathan admitted to Nora during one such visit, while Daniel was checking the perimeter with his foreman. "Emily adores you, and I've never seen my brother so determined." "Stubborn is the word you're looking for," Nora said with a small smile. Nathan laughed. "That too, the Grayson men can be hard-headed when we set our minds to something, or someone." On the 8th day, Sheriff Miller rode out to the ranch with news. Chandler was spotted in Prescott yesterday, got into a card game, started a brawl when he lost. He's in the jail there now. Relief washed over Nora like a cool rain after drought. Is he? Will they keep him? For a few days, at least. The man he attacked is pressing charges. The sheriff hesitated. But Miss Blackburn, once he's released, there's nothing to stop him from coming back this way. Unless, Daniel said thoughtfully, there was a reason for the authorities to hold him longer. Like testimony about his activities in Tucson. Nora felt her heart skip a beat. You mean? The sheriff in Prescott is a friend of mine, Miller said. If you were willing to give a statement, he could hold Chandler while they investigate. Possibly even transfer him back to Tucson to face new charges. Daniel looked at Nora, his expression serious but supportive. It's your decision, but you wouldn't be alone this time. Nora thought about the girls who had worked alongside her at the Silver Palace. About the young one who had died at Chandler's hands, about the fear she'd lived with since fleeing Tucson. I'll do it, she said finally. I'll testify. The journey to Prescott took 2 days, Daniel insisting on accompanying Nora despite her protests that he was needed at the ranch. Sheriff Miller rode with them, along with 2 deputies from Camp Verde. I'm not taking any chances with your safety, Daniel told her as they made camp the first night. Not when you're finally facing your past. In Prescott, they found James Chandler still in custody, his fury evident when he learned Nora was there to testify against him. The local judge, impressed by the seriousness of the allegations, agreed to hold him while the Tucson authorities were contacted. It's not over, Chandler snarled as deputies led him back to his cell after the preliminary hearing. I'll find you again, Nora, no matter where you run. Daniel stepped between them, his presence like a wall. No, you won't, because she's done running. The return journey to Camp Verde felt different, somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from Nora's shoulders. The fear wasn't gone entirely, but it had diminished, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. As they crested the final hill overlooking the town, Daniel reined in his horse beside the wagon where Nora sat with Sheriff Miller. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, nodding toward the Verde Valley spread before them, the town nestled beside the river, his ranch visible in the distance. Yes, Nora agreed. It really is. I was thinking, Daniel continued, that once all this business with Chandler is settled, you might consider a more permanent arrangement in Camp Verde. Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. Think I'll ride ahead, let folks know we're back. He nudged his horse forward, leaving them alone. Nora looked at Daniel, taking in his strong profile against the autumn sky. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind, Mr. Grayson? Daniel turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious. The kind that involves a ring, a preacher, and a promise to face whatever comes next together. Nora's breath caught. Daniel, are you asking? I am. I love you, Nora Blackburn. I have since the moment you played Chopin in Mrs. Wallace's parlor. Maybe even since I first saw you in Pot's store, holding your chin high despite the whispers. He moved his horse closer to the wagon. I know it hasn't been long and there's still Chandler to deal with, but I'm certain of what I feel, what I want. The town will talk, Nora said, though her heart was racing with joy. Daniel smiled, that confident smile that had first captured her attention. They'll talk anyway, might as well give them something worth talking about. He reached across to take her hand. What do you say? Will you marry me, scandal and all? Nora looked at their joined hands, then at the valley before them, the place that had become home despite everything because of him. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure. Yes, I will. The wedding took place in November, after word came from Tucson that James Chandler would stand trial based on Nora's testimony, and that of several other women who had found the courage to come forward. With Chandler facing years in prison, Nora finally felt free to embrace her future without looking over her shoulder. The ceremony was small but meaningful, held in the Grayson ranch house with Reverend Parker officiating, after some persuasion from Mrs. Wallace and, surprisingly, Nathan Grayson. Emily played the piano piece Nora had been teaching her, her small face serious with concentration until the last note, when she broke into a delighted smile. Not everyone from town attended, of course. Mrs. Prescott and several others made their disapproval known by their absence. But those who mattered were their Mrs. Wallace, Mr. Potts, the blacksmith and his family, Sheriff Miller, and even a few of the girls from Tucson who had testified against Chandler, women who were building new lives just as Nora had. Daniel waited for her at the front of the parlor, his eyes never leaving her as she walked toward him in a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Holt had helped her make. When it came time to speak their vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I, Daniel James Grayson, take you, Nora Elizabeth Blackburn, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." Nora's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the words, still amazed that this man, this good, strong, stubborn man, had chosen her despite everything. Later, as they danced together in the ranch yard under strings of lanterns reminiscent of the Founders' Day celebration, Daniel pulled her close. "Happy, Mrs. Grayson?" he murmured against her ear. "Very," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm still not sure I deserve all this." Daniel pulled back to look at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Nora, listen to me. You deserve every happiness. You've faced more challenges than most people will in a lifetime, and you've met them with courage and grace. Only because you believed in me when no one else did." "No," he said firmly. "I recognized what was already there, your strength, your talent, your heart. All I did was refuse to let others define you by your past." As the celebration continued around them, Nora thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, from Boston to Tucson to Camp Verde, from professor's daughter to dancer to piano teacher to rancher's wife. Each step had shaped her, but none defined her completely. "They said I'd bring you shame," she said softly, remembering that day in the hotel dining room. Daniel smiled, pulling her close again as the music swelled. "And I wear it proudly, Mrs. Grayson, every single day." In the years that followed, Camp Verde grew and changed, as did the Grayson Ranch under Daniel and Nora's stewardship. Emily became an accomplished pianist, eventually teaching alongside her Aunt Nora in the music school they established in town. James Chandler was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in Yuma prison, his threats rendered empty by distance and iron bars. Some people in town never fully accepted Nora's place as Daniel's wife, but many others came to respect the woman who had faced her past and helped bring a criminal to justice, who taught their children to play piano, who stood beside her husband through drought and prosperity alike. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Daniel presented Nora with a gift, the deed to a building on Camp Verde's Main Street. "What's this?" she asked, examining the paper. "The future," Daniel replied. "A proper music hall where you can teach and perform. Where Emily and other talented young people can develop their gifts without having to leave for the cities." Tears filled Nora's eyes as she looked at the deed, then at her husband. "Daniel, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll play Chopin for me tonight," he suggested, pulling her into his arms. "The piece you played the day I knew I was falling in love with you." "Nocturne in E-flat major," Nora said with a smile. "I remember." "And then," Daniel continued, his voice dropping lower, "we can put the children to bed early and celebrate properly. Their son Thomas, now 3, and daughter Margaret, just turning 1, were beloved additions to their family. Thomas with his father's blue eyes and stubborn chin, Margaret with her mother's auburn hair and delicate features. That evening, after the children were asleep, and the ranch house was quiet save for the distant sounds of night birds, Nora played for Daniel just as she had promised. Her fingers moved across the keys of the piano he had brought all the way from San Francisco as a wedding gift, the music flowing through her as naturally as breathing. Daniel watched from his favorite chair, his expression one of perfect contentment. When the last note faded, he rose and came to sit beside her on the piano bench. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Marrying me, staying in Camp Verde when you could have gone to San Francisco or back east." Nora turned to face him, taking in the face she had come to know as well as her own, the small lines at the corners of his eyes, the streak of silver now appearing at his temples, the gentle curve of his mouth that still made her heart beat faster when he smiled. "Never," she said honestly. "Not for a single moment." Daniel took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that had become familiar yet never lost its ability to move her. "Nor I, Nora Grayson. They said you'd bring me shame, but all you've ever brought me is joy." Outside their window, the Arizona night spread vast and star-filled above the ranch that was their home, their legacy, the physical manifestation of a love that had defied convention and gossip. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound plaintive yet somehow triumphant in the darkness. Nora leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, content in the knowledge that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginnings, led exactly where they were meant to home, to the arms of someone who saw beyond the past to the truth of the heart within. "Play something else," Daniel requested softly. "Something for just the two of us." And as her fingers found the keys once more, Nora played a melody of her own composition, one that spoke of second chances and courage, of standing firm in the face of judgment, of finding love where least expected. It was their story, set to music, the former dancer and the stubborn rancher who had refused to let others define what they could become together. In the years that followed, the Grayson Music Hall became a centerpiece of Camp Verde's cultural life, drawing musicians from as far away as Phoenix and Tucson. Nora's reputation as a teacher and pianist spread throughout the territory, her past as a dancer all but forgotten as she guided generation after generation of young people in their musical education. Daniel and Nora welcomed two more children, James, named in a gesture of reclamation that surprised even Daniel, and Elizabeth, who arrived 10 years after Margaret and was doted on by her older siblings. The Arizona territory grew and changed, moving toward statehood, and the Graysons grew with it. Daniel expanded the ranch, implemented new methods of cattle raising, and served on territorial committees working toward the future. Nora's music school flourished, becoming known throughout the Southwest. They faced challenges together, drought years that tested the ranch's resources. Thomas's decision to attend university in California rather than stay and work the land. Margaret's brief rebellion against small-town life. Through it all, they remained united, the bond between them growing stronger rather than diminishing with time. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town of Camp Verde, now a proper city with paved streets and electric lights, held a celebration in their honor. Even Mrs. Prescott, now elderly but still formidable, attended, finally acknowledging with a grudging nod what everyone else had long since recognized. The Graysons were the backbone of the community, their marriage a testament to the power of love over prejudice and past mistakes. That night, after the celebration, Daniel and Nora stood on the porch of their ranch house, looking out at the land that had been their home for so long. Though both were now in their 50s, with silver threading their hair and lines marking their faces, they still saw in each other the young man and woman who had defied convention to build a life together. "You remember what you said to Sheriff Miller that day in the hotel?" Nora asked, leaning against the porch railing. Daniel smiled, coming to stand beside her. "I said a lot of things to Tom Miller over the years. You told him if caring for me brought you shame, you'd wear it proudly." "And I have," Daniel replied, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Though it turned out not to be shame at all, but the greatest honor of my life." As they stood together in the gathering twilight, the legacy they had built spread out before them: the ranch, the music hall, their children and grandchildren, the respect they had earned through perseverance and integrity. From the scandal of a former dancer and a stubborn rancher had come something enduring, something that had changed not only their own lives, but the character of Camp Verde itself. And as the first stars appeared in the vast Arizona sky, Daniel turned to his wife, the woman who had once feared her past would forever define her future, and kissed her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day. "I love you, Nora Grayson," he said simply. "And I love you, Daniel," she replied. "Always have, always will." In that moment, as in all the moments they had shared across a quarter-century, there was no shame, only pride, only love, only the certainty that some journeys, no matter how unlikely their beginnings, lead exactly where they are meant to: home.